All right, let's jump right in. We're about to get into a really cool philosophical puzzle that gets to the very heart of how we think about God. And we're using a brilliant paper by Tennyson Samraj to guide us. It all kicks off with one simple but seriously deep question.
Just think about that for a second. What if you had an encounter with the creator of the entire universe, but you had absolutely no way of recognizing them? You just walk away, none the wiser. Sounds kind of out there, right? But it's a real philosophical head-scratcher.
And this problem actually has a name, and it comes from this old Greek tragedy, the Electra paradox. See, Electra knows a fact. She knows that Orestes is her brother. But when he's standing right there in front of her, she doesn't recognize him at all. She has the information, but she can't make the identification. And that right there is the heart of what we're talking about today. Yeah, we can build up a whole list of things we think we know about God. But does any of that information actually help us pick God out of a lineup, so to speak? Could we really identify God in the real world? So this is what our source material calls the God paradox, the problem of knowing all about something without being able to actually recognize it. And to really get it, we've got to go back to one of the oldest, biggest questions in all of philosophy. The whole journey really starts with questions just like this one from the philosopher Leibniz. I mean, think about it. It's maybe the biggest question we can ask. The universe is here. It had to come from somewhere, didn't it? Our brains are just wired to look for that first domino, that starting point for everything. And so, that hunt for a starting point, it leads us right here. If we're just using pure reason, what kinds of clues can we gather? Let's take a look at what we can logically figure out about God's nature, or what philosophers like to call God's essence. So, okay, when you follow that chain of logic, you end up with a few key definitions. Like, to stop yourself from going down an endless rabbit hole of what came before that, you eventually land on this idea of an uncaused cause. You know, something that has to exist for anything else to exist, a necessary being. And by definition, this being has to be immortal, and it's got to be the creator.
But, and this is a huge point, these are all logical definitions, not like a police sketch. The source paper has this great comparison. Saying God is the creator is kind of like saying someone is a professor. It tells you their job title, but it doesn't tell you who they are. It's not an ID card.
And that leads us straight into the core of the problem, the identity problem. We've got a pretty solid definition, right? We know the what. But as you're about to see, we are totally missing the who. All right, let's break this down. On one side, you've got essence. Think of this as the what. It's all based on logic, what philosophers call a priori reasoning. It's a definition, a job description, like uncaused cause. But then, on the other side, you've got identity. This is the who or the which one. And this isn't based on logic. It's based on facts you find out in the real world. That's a posteriori knowledge. It's a specific, unique fingerprint. And when it comes to God, well, that box is just a big question mark. To make this crystal clear, let's use this fantastic analogy from the paper. Think about water. For thousands of years, people totally understood the essence of water. We knew what it did, its properties, its role in our world. You know, it's wet, it's clear, you can't live without it. And then science came along. Through observation and experiments, looking at the actual world, we discovered its a posteriori identity. Now, that's a fancy term from the philosopher Saul Kripke, but all it really means is a fact that you could only learn by actually investigating the world. And boom, here it is. Water is H2O. That's it. That's its specific, factual, unchangeable identity. It's not just a description of what it does, it's the very thing that it is. This is that unique fingerprint we were talking about. So, that brings us right to the million-dollar question of this whole explainer. We've got the essence of God, just like we had the essence of water. But what is God's H2O? What's that specific, factual, verifiable ID marker? And the answer is, we just don't have one. So this lack of a divine H2O leads us right to the big reveal, the solution to our whole mystery. We can finally solve that paradox we started with. God is totally believable, but in the end, unidentifiable. The author of the paper we're looking at, Tennyson Samraj, just puts it perfectly. He says, we can define God, and based on that definition, believing makes a lot of sense. It's a totally coherent position. But we can't identify God. Okay, so here's the bottom line. We have these really powerful philosophical reasons to believe in the idea of a necessary being, but we have no revealed, tangible H2O-style marker to confirm the reality of that being. And the source makes another great point. Even sacred texts, they mostly describe God's actions, God's will, God's essence, but not a specific verifiable identity.
So if God is unidentifiable, what does that mean for faith? Well, our final section digs right into that, and it suggests that this isn't a problem for belief at all. In fact, it might be the very foundation of it.
The whole argument is that this isn't some kind of mistake or an accident. The fact that there's no divine fingerprint, well, that's not a bug in the system. It's a fundamental feature, and that changes everything. Okay, so here's how the logic flows. Step 1, God's specific identity isn't revealed to us. Step 2, because of that, you can't be forced to believe by the evidence. I mean, if God's identity was as plain as day, as obvious as H2O, belief wouldn't be a choice. It'd just be seeing what's there. And that leads to the big conclusion. Belief in God has to be a conscious choice, what the paper calls a belief decision. What this all means is that the power and the relevance of God isn't something you're going to find in a science lab or through some kind of proof. No, instead, it's found in the power and relevance of the very questions that got us started on this journey in the first place. Those big questions like, why is there something here instead of nothing? And so we end up right back where we started, but now with a totally new way of looking at it. If belief in God is a choice, not a conclusion you're forced to make, then what does that say about the questions that lead us there? Maybe the real value isn't in finding some final, definitive answer. Maybe the value is in the incredible, enduring power of the questions themselves, the very questions that define our search for meaning in this whole universe.